Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this latest class on kashrut. And I have to warn you, this one's going to be a little challenging. Sometimes when I first began these kashrut classes, people said, "Come on, Rabbi, how many hours to wait between meat and milk? Easy. Everyone knows it's 6 hours. And how long to wait from milk to meat? Easy, not a problem. Just wash out your mouth and have some bread." And the Ashkenazim are a little machmir. Well, what's the whole problem? Why are we having so many classes? I said, just hold your horses. It's going to get a little bit more interesting. And in tonight's class, we are going to touch upon something called ta'am ki'ikar, where the taste or the flavor is as if it is the main part of the thing. And we're going to get into why that halachic concept, which I'll explain a little bit later, why it's so important. Before we do that, we're going to touch upon the necessity of having separate dishes for milk and meat. And the Rama, Rav Moshe Isserles, who writes his comments on the Shulchan Aruch, his additions there, he writes here, Kvar nahagu kol Yisrael liyot lahem shnei sakinim. All of Israel are already accustomed to have two knives, ulushom echad mahem she'eh lo heker, and to mark on one of them to be very clear which one is which. V'nahagu lishom shel chalav, and he says that their custom was to mark out the dairy ones. Ve'ein l'shanot minhag shel Yisrael. One should not change the custom of the Jewish people. So he said, even back there, 500 years ago, the Ramah says we have separate dishes, separate knives, etc., and we are specific to mark out the dairy ones. So the dairy would get a blue, or maybe an SBH would get a yellow, and so on and so forth. The Kaf HaChaim, that's Rav Yosef Chaim Sofer, not the Kaf HaChaim of Rav Palachi, but the Rav HaChaim, where the Kaf HaChaim of Yaakov Sofer, who writes his commentary on, also as a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, at least on the sections of Or Chaim and a couple of bits of Yoreh De'ah, he writes there, U'ke'arot ketanot u'gdolot shebabayit, the small and large plates in one's house, Shel basar levad v'shel chalav levad. You should have meat separately and dairy separately. Yasu mishnei minim lehekira, and you should make two different types so that you can shelo yitchalef, so you shouldn't mix them up, shouldn't confuse them. V'chein bekapot u'masnagot, same with spoons and forks. V'chein kol hakelim, and so with all the vessels. So the Ramah just mentioned knives. Here the Kaf HaChaim says separate plates, large and small, spoons and forks as well, all vessels. Alternatively, he should just make marks on the dairy ones, and this is the custom of all Israel. Now, you might be wondering, dairy marks? I don't know anyone who does that. And the footnote 1 here, it notes that today that doesn't seem to be our custom. And everyone who keeps a kosher home, has specific dishes for milk and specific dishes for meat. And, very clear in our home, we have blue dishes for dairy, we have red dishes for meat, we have our Shabbat dishes, obviously we have our Pesach dishes for meat and for milk, so everyone has their own thing that they're going on there. If you carry on again, if you have your notes there, you can see a little bit about Rav Chaim Sofer, who lived in Iraq, and he was a Talmid of the Ben Ish Chai, but you can have a look there a little bit more about him. Now, the Taz, the Torah Zahav, mentions, you know how you have all these different things for milk and meat? He says it's a good idea to have a separate for the salt shakers. He says here, V'siyem Rav Shlomo's Luria, he quotes Shlomo Luria, Mikol Makom, משבח אני מנהג אשכנז, שיש להם כלים עשויים למלח, אחד לבשר ואחד לחלב. I praise the Ashkenazi custom to have one salt shaker for meat and one for dairy. Why? לפעמים בתוך הסעודה שידיו מלוכלכות מן הבשר, לוקח שם מלח You got to be careful because sometimes your hands can be dirty from meat food, and one later takes it for dairy and vice versa. So in order to be careful of this, he says it's good to have one for meat and one for milk. Nevertheless, the notes add here, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch on meat and milk and the work titled Tosafot Halacha point out that this was more of a necessity in earlier times when the salt shakers were open and other residue could simply fall inside. But today, when salt shakers are closed with tiny holes for the salt to come out, it's not necessary to have two salt shakers. They're just still, but some are still careful nowadays. So in our home, we don't have separate salt shakers for meat and milk. We just ask people to be careful. And this is what he writes here. But what is common in our times is a salt shaker with a cover that has holes, and one pours out the salt through the holes. In this manner, there is no need to designate two, one for meat or one for dairy, so one does not put food or one's hands inside. Okay, so there you go. You need to have a look at how you use it. So if you're going to be very old-fashioned and dip it like that, it's a problem. But otherwise, you are fine. And the Aruch HaShulchan adds, V'yesh hamedaktikin, there are those who are very careful, scrupulous, you might say. Sheyesh lahem shlosha sakinim, they have three types of knives. Echad shel basar, echad shel chalav, echad shechotchin bo lechem. They have one for cutting meat, one for cutting dairy, cheese perhaps, and one for cutting bread. Perhaps for us, we would say for cutting vegetables. They don't use it for meat and not for milk, just for cutting bread. And as I said, parenthetically, perhaps for cutting vegetables, as is the minhag of the Chassam family. But when we have this situation of having the paravan knives or the parav utensils, one has to be very careful to try to keep those separate. So, my friends, that was the easy part of the class. I'd like to end now and say we'll have a nice evening and see you all later. Because as I said, that was easy. Everyone knows they need to have meat and milk. Everyone knows they have parva sections. And now, if you still want to stay on, it's going to get really difficult. All right, I warned you. You're still here. You're a lovely audience. Let's jump into this. It's going to be hard. All right. My apologies ahead of time. It's called Ta'am Ke'ikar. And if you're in Ashkenazic circles, they'd say Tam Ke'ikar. But there you go. So in order to better understand the halachot that relate to the separation of meat and dairy utensils, we need to learn some basic principles about the Torah's conception of absorption of taste into utensils. Understanding these rules will allow us to appreciate some of the guidelines for dealing with mix-ups in the kitchen, as well as some of the additional rules concerning how the kitchen should ideally be used. The most important concept to be aware of is known as ta'am ke'ikar, which means that even if a forbidden food is removed from a mixture, the mixture is still forbidden if the taste, the ta'am of the food has been imparted inside. The same principle dictates that one who cooks a dairy food in a pot has rendered the pot chalavi, dairy, or leche, even if no dairy residue remains in the pot. This concept is derived by the Gemara in Pesachim from the verses which we're going to look about from the Nazir, the person who abstains from wine, from allowing his hair to grow, and doesn't come into contact with the dead body. Specifically, he's not allowed to eat grapes or drink wine. Okay, so I just want to understand this concept before we get into the psukim. If I take a pot and I cook something dairy in it, that pot becomes dairy. Therefore, it's going to be a problem if I use that same pot to cook meat. Okay, this is that issue. So why is that the case? Should be, I cleaned it out thoroughly, should be a parv pot. Why does it become a chalavi pot? Why does this come up in halacha? Psukim say, Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, Daber b'nei Yisrael, speak to the children of Israel, and saying to them, Ish or isha ki yaflin do neder nazir lahazir laHashem. If they to decide to take upon themselves a vow to be a man or a woman, to be a Nazirite, to abstain for the sake of Hashem. Miyayin v'sheicha yazir, chometz yayin v'chometz sheicha lo yishteh, v'chol mishrat anavim lo yishteh, v'anavim lachim v'yiveshim lo yochel. He shall abstain from new wine and aged wine. He shall not drink even vinegar made from new wine or aged wine, nor shall he drink anything in which grapes have been steeped. And he shall eat neither fresh grapes nor dried ones. And now this is the whole phrase we need to focus on. What is the issue with Mishrat HaNavim? With the fact that grapes have been soaking in it? Why is that a problem? Says the Gemara, Masechet Pesachim Mendalad Amud Aleph, 44a, Detanya, Mishrat liten ta'am ke'ikar. What's the issue of the soaked issue? What's that is soaked issue? Because of the concept of ta'am ke'ikar. The taste of the forbidden food is like that of its substance. She'im shara anavim b'mayim, that if one soaked grapes in water, v'yesh b'hem ta'am yayin, and it has the taste of wine, then it is, that person would be chayav, that person would be obligated for drinking such a thing, and therefore he would break his vow of being a Nazir. Says the Gemara, Mikana tadan kol Torah kula. From here we derive the halacha with regard to the entire Torah, not just for, this is a stricture for a Nazir, he can't even drink grape juice or water or grapes, because it tastes like wine or something. Rather, anything which is forbidden to us, for example, a forbidden mixture of meat and milk, we have this concept of ta'am ke'ikar. So if it tastes, the taste of the dairy is imparted into the meat, I've got a problem. According to the Gemara, the fact that a Nazir may not consume mishrat, the liquid in which grapes are soaked, even if the grapes have been removed, demonstrates that ta'am ke'ikar, the taste of an item, in this case the flavor of the grapes in the water, has the same halachic status as the grapes themselves. According to many Rishonim, we see from the fact that this principle is derived from verses that it is, in fact, not rabbinically inscribed, but it is deoraita. This is a Torah-level prohibition. And the Gerah, the Vilna Gaon, in his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, states this is the accepted halacha. To kaimalad, because we establish ta'am ke'ikar, this concept that the taste is like the matter itself. Deoraita is a biblical prohibition. As we learned in the 3rd chapter of Pesachim, Perek Vav de Nazir, in the 6th chapter of Masechet Nazir, V'niten tam v'chulei, v'alken, Drasha Gemurahi. This is a full interpretation, i.e., this is not just a rabbinic leaning, what's known as nasmachta be'alma, rather this is really something that we have to take grave care over. This is not something rabbinic, merely rabbinic. This is deoraita, this is tam ke'ikar deoraita. I've got to take it very, very seriously indeed. According to this principle, even a small element of flavor absorbed is still halachically significant, even if the original food has been removed, and if the flavor comes from a non-kosher food or from meat that was mixed with dairy, it can only be nullified if the amount is so minute that one cannot detect the taste at all. This is evident from the following Gemara and Zevachim. Says Rava, Amar Rava, Amor Rabbanan Batama. The sages say that the status of an item as a mixture is determined by the ta'am, the taste. V'amor Rabbanan, and the rabbi said it's decided by Ruba, the majority. So, if I can taste it, then it's not nullified. That's Rava's position. The Hachamim say, the sages say, it is prohibited when it is the majority. Min b'she'eno mino b'ta'ama. When it's one type and something completely different, another type, then we go by ta'ama, taste. Min b'mino beruba. So what's going on here? On the one hand, Rava says there's a machloket that we go by taste, and sometimes we go by majority. And here it's saying, and here we're saying there's something very different, that when it's min b'she'eno mino, it's ta'am, and it's min b'mino, it's rov. Isaac, I can see your, Isaac, do you want me to discuss your question publicly or keep it private?
Sure. I just had the question of, so what beracha would you say on water which had grapes soaking in it?
Okay, so it's a good question. It's not connected specifically to this topic, but I would say that it's it would be, the water would be shehakol, so it doesn't transfer everything that what we're doing right here, but nevertheless, even though it doesn't get the halachic status of gefen, we would still say that he violated the prohibition of benefiting from the grapes. It's an interesting point. It should be that it's uniform, but it isn't. Good question. So here, so if you look at this summary here, according to this passage, in a case of min b'she'eno mino, where two distinct foods are mixed together, the mixture is prohibited as long as one can taste the forbidden food. But the taste is no longer there, you don't have to worry about it. Now you're wondering, how do you taste something which is prohibitive? It's meat and milk. You can ask, we'll see if we get there. Maybe you'll have a non-Jewish chef taste it. Perhaps we can make a evaluation. Perhaps we're going to get into this concept of batel bashishim. It's nullified if it's 1 in 60. But in the case of min bimina, of two foods that are alike, for example, two pieces of meat, one which is kosher and one which is not, the prohibited substance is nullified by majority since it does not contribute any distinct taste. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah indicates that all agree with Rava in the case of min b'she'eno mino, that depends on taste. With regards to min b'mino, when it's two things which are the same, the Gemara brings two opinions though. Neither agree with Rava that the majority is followed. Okay? Here it says, here in Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph, Rav and Shmuel da Amri Tirvaihu, both of them say, Kol Isurin shebeTorah, all prohibited things which are mentioned in the Torah, Bemina b'mashahu, Beminan b'mashahu, if it's the same type, then any amount, b'mashu, then you can just nullify it by having a little bit more of it. Shelo b'minan, and when it's not its type, then we go by this concept of noten ta'am, by the flavor that's imparted. If there's no flavor, we don't have to worry about it. Rabbi Yochanan v'Rish Lakish b'damrei tirvaihu, and then it says Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish both say, Kol isurin shebeTorah, bein b'minan, bein shelo b'minan, but noten ta'am. Then we go back by this concept of if it imparts flavor. So, how are we going to resolve this issue? The Ran resolves the contradiction concerning the case of min b'mino by saying that Rava, who allowed relying on the majority, was referring to the Doraita rule. But the rabbinic rule is more stringent. In accordance with the two opinions in Avodah Zarah, the Ran himself rules in accordance with the position of Rabbi Yochanan, that min b'mino, when it's the same thing, is like two pieces of meat, one kosher and one not, is judged based on the amount of flavor conveyed, which is eliminated to a ratio of 1 in 60. What we know in common parlance is batel bashishim. It's nullified in 1 in 60. The Ran on the Rif explains this. Amura banan beruba. The Rif said the min b'mino is nullified in a majority. Uparshinan, and we explain there, Mim b'mino beruba, hanemile bedoraita, when they say that's only on a Torah level, it's nullified in a majority. Avamiderabana, but on a rabbinic prohibition, bein shenitarev gufo v'nivlal, bein she'en sham ena plitato bashishim. And in there it says, but by rabbinic law, whether the actual substance itself is mixed or the flavor alone remains in the mixture, but the item itself was removed, it is with 60, with shishim, and we follow like Rabbi Yochanan. The Ran's logic here is that if there was an actual mixture of meat and milk, or a non-kosher food with kosher food, we determine the permissibility based on the amount of taste, and that is estimated using the ratio of 1 to 60. However, the Ran's reason for this ruling is that we must assess the level of mixing that took place. Consequently, the notion of bitul, of nullification, applies only when there is an actual mixture. But it would seem that if there are a few solid pieces, some of which are not kosher, but they were never actually mixed together, then we can follow the majority. And this is indeed what the Shulchan Aruch rules, that when there is a mixture of solid foods that have not actually been merged together, the forbidden food is nullified in the majority. As he rules here in Siman Kuftet, Chaticha she'enar v'uya lehitkaved, something which is not suitable for honoring distinguished guests. For example, just very small pieces of meat. Shnit arva ba'acherot, and they're mixed together with others of the same type, mim b'mina, yavesh b'yavesh, and both are solid. Dahainu sheinu nivla, that means that they were not mixed together. Va'isu omeid ba'atzmon, it says if the prohibited thing is standing on one side, ela shenit arev ve'eno makira, they do not mix together and the forbidden food stands by itself, but it is mixed in and one cannot identify it. Chad betrei batil, then we can say it nullifies in a ratio of just 1 to 2. Okay? V'kol zeh keshenit arev b'mino, this is all when it is mixed in the same type. Aval shelo b'mino ve'eno makiro, but when it's a different type and one does not see it, afilu yavesh b'yavesh sarich shishim, even when they are both solids, then we require the 1 in 60 rule. Following this introduction, we can now deal with the common mishap which all rabbis love, involving a pot, spoon, food, and fire. Okay, I always tell people, how hot was it? Okay, was it on the fire? Okay, how much was it? How big was the pot? How small was the spoon? What happens if one mistakenly puts a dairy spoon that was ben yoma, which had been used in the last 24 hours, into a pot in which a meat dish was cooking? This is a case of min b'she'eno minah, 2 different types. So we must evaluate whether there is a ratio of 60 to 1 of the meat dish and the pot to the part of the spoon that was inserted, as it is assumed that the spoon transfers flavor into the pot. Either way, the spoon will be forbidden since it had previously had dairy absorbed into it. And now meat was absorbed into it as well. This is the ruling of the Shulchan Aruch, and this is normal, okay? If it's hot, remember this has to be that it's hot, that cooking is actually taking place. It's not, I put my meat spoon in the milk dishwasher, or the meat spoon was in the dairy sink, or the thing was cold and my meat spoon mixed the milk thing, or what happened today in our house when one of the kids put a meat sandwich on a dairy plate, but everything was cold. No concern there, you just need to wash things off. But when it's hot, here's the case. The Shulchan Aruch says, "Hatochev kav chol hevet b'kedera shel basar." If one inserts a dairy spoon into a meat pot, or ipcha, or the opposite, misharim b'kol ma shenetcha mimenu b'kedera. We estimate the amount that was inserted of it into the pot. Im yesh shishim levatel hakaf. If there will be 60 of the large pot and the food of the meat to nullify the spoon, hakadera v'tavshil mutarim, then the pot and the food would be permitted. Aval hakaf asur, but the spoon would be forbidden. Bein im basar, bein im chalav, whether it is meat or dairy. Lefi shehi belu'a mi basar b'chalav, since that spoon absorbed meat and dairy together. V'im ein shishim, and if it's a very large spoon and a very small pot and a very small amount of food, hakol asur b'hana'ah, then everything is forbidden to eat, and it's even forbidden for benefit. Afilu hakadera, even the pot itself, it would require kashering. Ach mutar latet letocha perot utzonein, kivan sheino nehene miguf ha'isur. But it is permitted to place fruit or cold dishes inside, as one does not benefit from the actual forbidden substance. So there it says you could, you'd need to kasher that pot, and if you didn't get round to kashering the pot, you could still use the pot to store things. In this case, says the notes here, we must evaluate whether there is a ratio of 60-1 of the meat pot to the dairy spoon to determine whether the pot and food are permitted. However, as the Shulchan Aruch notes, the spoon is forbidden regardless, since it now has elements of absorbed meat and dairy in it and must be recashered. Our previous scenario dealt with a dairy utensil inserted into a meat utensil with a meat dish. What is the halacha where one cooks dairy food in a meat utensil? There too, one must similarly assess whether the amount of food was negated by 1 in 60 to the volume of the pot which has absorbed taste from it. This is the ruling of the Gemara in Chulin as well as in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so it's the same for meat and for milk. Says the Gemara here, Kedeira shebashel babasar, a pot which one cooked meat in. Lo yivashel b'chalav, you cannot cook dairy in it. Ve'im bishel, and if you did just do so, benotein ta'am, then we make a decision based on whether it imparts flavor. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Kedeira shebashel babasar, lo yochal b'chalav. You have a meat pot, you cannot cook dairy in it. Ve'im bishel ba b'toch me'et la'et, and if you cooked dairy within it within 24 hours, asur b'notein ta'am, then it's forbidden if it imparts flavor. Okay, and he writes here, in general, there is rarely ever a case of bittul bashishim in either of these cases of cooking in the wrong type of pot. Why? Because the pot is so large. Think of the surface area or the surface volume of these large pots, which has absorbed the meat into it, and I've got a little bit of dairy in there. Therefore, I'm not going to have a bittul bashishim, and I'm going to have to kasher, I'm going to have to purge that pot. I have to leave it for 24 hours, and then I'm going to have to immerse it in boiling water. Okay? This is noted by the Beit Yosef, who suggests that bittul b'shishim would only be relevant in a few specific cases. An example I have with a small teaspoon. That is going to be nullified against a very large meat pot with a meat chamin, for example, or whatever you're cooking. But a large dairy pot, which you mistakenly cooked some meat in, never going to happen. There's always going to be way too much pot to the dairy, and you're going to have to kasher it, and that's what the Beit Yosef writes there. From the words of our teacher, the Torah, in the name of the Rosh, it is apparent that there is not a proportion of 60 times within what is in the utensil to the entire utensil. Alternatively, it may occur when the pot is so wide that it holds enough water equivalent to 60 times the surface area of the pot, such as if the surface is thin and very wide, but very, very rare to have such a situation. Another common mishap that may occur in the kitchen is when a person mistakenly covers one pot with the lid of another pot. What is the status of the pot, the lid, and the food in this case? The Rama addresses it and rules as follows. The Rama, if one took a hot lid from a meat pot, has to be hot again here, and when I say hot, scalding, over 115 Fahrenheit, and placed it on a dairy pot. So here you go, a meat cover, and you placed it while they were both hot on the dairy pot. If shnehem chamim, both of them are red hot. Shnehem asurim, both of them are prohibited. If you have a mixture of meat and milk inside. But if the cover was cold, and the pot was hot, again, both of them are prohibited. If the bottom one began steaming and the top and the lid began to get hot. Why? Because we have this concept of tata gavar, where the bottom one is stronger than the top one, and it would impart the issue. Now, if it's not very hot, then they wouldn't both be prohibited. So again, you have to really make sure when you're asking your question to the rabbi, are shnehem chamim? Are they really both hot?
Can I ask a question to the rabbi?
Yes, Rubisa.
What if the contents of the pot are not meat or dairy, but the pot in and of itself is?
So you're dealing with, I've got a meat pot, I'm doing some parve food, and the lid is dairy?
Yes.
Great question. So in that case, is it red hot?
I don't know.
Steaming?
Let's go with yes.
Okay, with yes, then you could have an issue there of kashering, but I don't think you may be able to get away from that there, since you don't have this issue of having meat. Let's say I've got meat pot and meat, and that's all good stuff, and I've got a dairy lid coming down. I don't have a mixture of meat and milk happening. Whereas with the meat pot and the dairy pot, I'd have to ask questions. For example, were the meat pot and the milk lid, were they used in the last 24 hours? Because we're going to get into this of Eino Ben Yomo and Ben Yomo, of when it's used in the last 24 hours. Then we have this concept of Noten Ta'am L'Shvach, it imparts positive flavor, and therefore it would be an issue, or it's notein ta'am lifgam, it's giving a negative flavor. So I would say let's hold off on your question till we've learned some more concepts. How's that?
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question too.
Go for it, Isaac.
What is meant by hot and cold, and is it relatively hot between the two items? Is that an issue?
So hot needs to be it needs to be hotter than something that my hand would recoil from the heat. So anything which is over 115 Fahrenheit. It's a low bar.
Okay.
It's not 200 Fahrenheit. It's only 115, so it's about 46 Celsius. That
Okay,
means
and what is and anything below that is considered cold?
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm saying there's a lot of scenarios where people have mistakes where I tell them it's probably under 46 degrees, because the real issues are when it has to be on the fire. It's on the gas, it's on the stovetop. That's the issue. A lot of the other scenarios are, something was resting on something, or something was warm, but it wasn't halachically significant. The Pri Megadim adds that even if the lid has not yet become hot enough to be yad soledet bo, that's where it's over 115 Fahrenheit, if it has begun to steam, it is forbidden nonetheless. Okay, that's an extra stricture of the Pri Megadim. Uberoteach im hazea ve'en yad soledet ba asur. It's still prohibited there if it's steaming. Okay, so again, when would it steam? It would steam if it was on the stove. So we have now seen so far that flavor from a food or utensil that comes in contact with another utensil or food will be transferred from one to the other. However, there is an exception to this rule known as notein ta'am lifgam, which is what I wanted to introduce, which the Rabisa preempted, that an impotent flavor or one that detracts from the taste of the other food rather than enhancing it does not get transferred. For example, and I always tell people the case of a dishwasher. A dishwasher sometimes can get hot, but the soap in the dishwasher adds a negative taste, and therefore it doesn't matter if after the fact one had meat and dairy in the same dishwasher. One important application of this rule is a case where the meat or dairy utensil was not used in the previous 24 hours. Again, I would say, in that case, that the meat pot, which hadn't been used for 24 hours, any flavor which that meat pot would emit would be negative. The Gemara assumes that after 24 hours, any taste that remains in the pot is considered impotent based on the principle of notein ta'am lifgam. Therefore, if one cooks dairy in a meat pot that was not used for 24 hours, known as eino ben yomo pot, the dairy food in the pot is permitted. Nevertheless, since the pot has been mistakenly absorbed the taste of both meat and dairy, it must be kashered before being used again. And this is the ruling given by the Shulchan Aruch, and we can look at it together. So there's good news. The good news is the dinner is saved. The bad news, you're going to have to kasher the pot. Okay? Kedera shibishel ba basar, a pot that one cooked meat in. Lo yibashel ba chalav, you should not cook dairy in. Bim bishel ba batoch meit le'eit, and if one cooked within 24 hours, asur benotein ta'am, it's forbidden by the taste that it imparts. And the Rama adds, but tzarich l'sha'er neged kol ha'kedera, and one needs to measure it against the entirety of the pot. And it's a whole that complicated surface area equation. Aval im shaha me'et le'et kodem shibishel ba, but if one had waited 24 hours from the last time that pot had been used for meat, havelei notein ta'am nifgam, then the flavor which is imparted from that pot is negative. Umutar tafshil, and therefore we permit the food which was cooked in it. Aval hakadera asur, but the pot is prohibited, levashel ba, to cook in it. Lo basar v'lo chalav, you can't cook meat or dairy, you have to rekasher that pot. The reason that Chazal instituted a decree concerning using a non-ben yoma pot, this non-24-hour pot, even though it does not render the food inside forbidden, is explained in the Gemara in Avodah Zarah as being that they were concerned people would get confused between utensils that were eino ben yoma and ben yoma, and mistakenly use ben yoma pots as well with foods of other types. So again, there we go. So the Gemara in Avodah Zarah here, Ayin Hey Amud Bet, says, "V'kulan shenish bahen ad shelo yatbil v'shelo yagil v'shelo yalben." And with regards to all pots belonging to a non-Jew, the one used before immersing and purging and heating them until white hot, i.e. kashering them in the appropriate manner, it's taught as follows. Tanichada asur, one taught it's prohibited. The Tanedich mutar, and one said it was prohibited and one said it was permitted. How? Lo kasha, there's no difficulty here. Ha kamandama notein tam nifgam asur. One said it's because it's giving out a negative taste and it's prohibited. Ha kamandama notein tam nifgam mutar. So the one who said it is prohibited is the one who holds that the negative taste is still prohibited. Whereas the one who says the negative taste is permitted, that's the one who permits it. Okay. So the Gemara explains this contradiction is not difficult. This ruling that the food prepared with such utensils is forbidden is according to the one who says that if a forbidden substance imparts flavor to a permitted food to the detriment of the mixture, the permitted food is forbidden. That ruling that the food prepared with such utensils is permitted is according to the one who says that if a forbidden substance imparts flavor to a permitted food to the detriment of the mixture, it remains permitted. Here too, since the flavor of non-kosher food imparted by the utensil detracts from the flavor of the food, such food is permitted. And the Gemara continues, Ulamanda Amar noten tam nefgam mutar, and the one who holds that the imparted flavor, this negative imparted flavor, is permitted. So why are the non-Jewish pots and pans prohibited? Amar Rav Chia Brei de Rav Huna lo asra Torah ela kedera bat yoma talav noten tam nefgam hu. Mikan ve'elach lishtayre gezera kedera she'ena bat yoma mishum kedera bat yoma. So Gemara says, but what's going on here? So Rav Chia bar Rav Huna says, the Torah renders forbidden only a pot that was used for cooking that same day by a non-Jew, as in such a case it does not impart flavor to food cooked in it to the detriment of the mixture. And the Gemara says, if that's true, from that point onward, the pot should be permitted. And then the rabbi said that they made a decree, we're not going to specify Eino Ben Yomo from Ben Yomo, and therefore we're going to say it's all out. Rashi explains there, utensils of non-Jews that require purging. This is all dealing with the war of revenge against the Midianites in chapter 31 of Bamidbar. You had to purge them through fire. There, you had to require putting them through boiling water. And the Gemara says, Bat Yoma, that same day, they were cooking presumably in the morning. Where an idol was be cooked today, but if he cooked it in yesterday, the taste had already become stale overnight. When later it is expelled into a different cooked food, it is only to the detriment of the other food. From that point onward, it should be permitted, even ideally. According to the Gemara, if the pot into which the non-kosher food was placed is no longer ben yomo, is no longer within that 24-hour period, it will not render hot food placed inside non-kosher. But the pot itself still requires kashering before use on a rabbinic level. The Gemara explains that the reason one must kasher the pot is to prevent people from mistakenly concluding that a non-kosher ben yoma pot, which may not be used biblically, may also be used without kashering. But why did Chazal institute a decree forbidding use of the Eino ben yoma pot, but not issue a similar decree concerning food cooked in the Eino ben yoma pot, which is permitted? So the Gemara is trying to understand, why on the one hand do we say that we're going to permit food, which and say, you know what, that pot wasn't used in the last 24 hours, and therefore I need to kasher the pot, but the food is permitted. Why do I say that's okay? But here, I don't want to make that distinction with a non-Jewish pot. So Tosfot explains something that is cooked in a non-ben yomo utensil is permitted, but one must give a reason why they permitted the food but forbade the pot. Since the pot, since the pot initially contained actual forbidden substance, but the food itself never absorbed any forbidden substances. So the pot, it does get the mixture of the meat and the milk forbidden, and that's why it requires kashering. But the food, all it absorbed was the negative taste of the food, which was more than 24 hours old, and therefore we're going to be lenient with the food, but strict with the pot needing to be kasher. That's the way that Tosafot explains it. According to Tosafot, explains here, the utensil has a more stringent status than the food, since the utensil originally had non-kosher taste absorbed into it. Therefore, it's forbidden now as well. But regard to the food, since it was cooked in a utensil at a time that the taste was no longer potent and no prohibited taste or flavor ever entered the food, there's no reason to forbid it after the fact. The same principle is employed concerning the case of cooking non-kosher food in a pot or dairy food in a meat pot is also applied regard to intentionally using a dairy spoon in a hot meat pot. The Shulchan Aruch rules that in the case of one who mistakenly inserts a non-24-hour dairy spoon that was clean into a pot of hot meat, the food and pot are not forbidden at all, since they only absorbed a non-potent taste. However, the spoon itself must be kashered and may not be used before that, since it has previously absorbed actual dairy taste. As it says here in Tzadi Daled, Im ein hakaf ben yomo, if the spoon was not used in the last 24 hours, hakdera v'tavshil mutarim, the pot and the dish are permitted, v'hakaf asur lechatchila, but the spoon is forbidden, bein im basar, bein im chalav, whether it was with meat or with milk. Mikol makom, nevertheless, b'diavad eina oseret, after the fact it's not totally forbidden, given shelo hayta bat yoma, since it was not actually ben yomo, had not actually been used within the last 24 hours. It seems from this ruling of the Shulchan Aruch, which mentions that the spoon may not be used for either meat or dairy, that will be permitted to use it when preparing or serving parva foods. This conclusion is stated explicitly by the Shach, as he writes here, V'hakaf asur lachatchila, bein im basar, bein im chalav. And the spoon is forbidden, ideally, to use both with meat and with dairy. Kevan shehu balua mi basar b'chalav, since it absorbed both meat and milk. Aval im she'ar devarim mutar, but with other things, it would be permitted. However, the custom is not to use the spoon even with parva before kashering, as mentioned by the Pri Megadim. So, technically you could use it. The Pri Megadim writes, that's not what we do. We would leave it to one side and kasher it later. Okay, let's do a little bit more and then we'll stop. So this is the last thing we'll look at, which is the status of stam kelim. And what is stam kelim? So far, we've discussed the halachot of mixing meat and dairy dishes as they relate to dishes that are definitely ben yomo. That we know for sure when we last used it, it was definitely in the last 24 hours, or definitely not ben yomo. No, I haven't used that for a week. It hasn't been 3 or 4 days since I used it. But we often don't remember whether the utensil was last used within 24 hours or not. What is the halacha in such a case concerning the impact of such a utensil on other foods or pots if it is used improperly? The answer is that the question is subject to a dispute of the Rishonim. According to Tosafot, the operative rule is that stam kelim, utensils that is undetermined whether they were last used, are considered to have the status of eino ben yomo. They haven't been used for more than 24 hours. The reason is that there is a double uncertainty. There's a sveka. Number one, perhaps a utensil is indeed not 24 hours old. And number two, even if it is within 24 hours, perhaps it was used for a food that is considered not to have a potent taste or does not impart flavor at all. Okay? And that is the position. He says here, Einan ben yoman, they're not considered to be within use of 24 hours. And that's the position of Rashin Rabbeinu Tam. And he says here, it's a sveka. Okay, it's a double doubt. Okay, safek, whether you really did use it today or whether perhaps it was longer ago. And even if you said you had used it today, perhaps it's not really giving out any positive flavor. On the other hand, the Bet Yosef writes that according to the Rambam, and sorry, Sfaradim, sorry guys, stam kelim have the status of ben yomo, have the status of being within use within the last 24 hours. So it says here, stam klei goyim hem becheskat she'enan ben yoman. Normally we say that with undefined vessels, they are more than 24 hours old. This is agreed upon by all poskim except the Rambam. He holds that vessels which we don't know about, that they are used within the last 24 hours. Okay, so how does the Shulchan Aruch rule? This, my friends, don't get worried. I was trying to scare you. This is one of only 2 scenarios where Shulchan Aruch does not hold like the Rambam. The other one is famously Chanukah, where we light our candles. The Sephardim, we light our candles like Tosfot, and the Ashkenazim like Rambam. Here, Shulchan Aruch rules like Tosfot and not like Rambam. Stam klei ovdei gilulim hem mechezkat she'enam b'nei yoman. לפי המעבר ונשתמש בהם קודם החכשר התבשיל מותר. So I don't know when the last time these things were used. We can presume them to be used more than 24 hours ago. Therefore, if one transgressed and used them before kashering, the food would be permitted. Just as unspecified utensils of Gentiles are considered Eno Ben Yomo, so too unspecified utensils that belong to us are presumed to be Eno Ben Yomo. And that's the important thing. We're making this juxtaposition. Just as the non-Jewish pots are Eno Ben Yomo, kach stam kelim, our kelim, shelanu, chezkat she'enan b'nei yoman. And the Shulchan Aruch rules, basar roteach, hot meat, shechatcho besakin cholevet, that was cut with a dairy knife. Aval im eno ben yomo, but if it was not used within the last 24 hours, or im eni yodea shu ben yomo, or you don't know that it was used in the last 24 hours, eno oser, it does not forbid the meat. It would still require kashering, but it would not make the meat forbidden. Okay, we are going to stop here because we've already been going for well over 50 minutes. And we